For more than 30 years, England was trapped in a cycle of violence. Kings were crowned, imprisoned, and killed. Power shifted not through law, but through blood. This conflict became known as the War of the Roses, a civil war that tore apart the English nobility and reshaped the monarchy forever. To understand how England reached this point, we must begin with a weak king, divided loyalties, and a throne no one could truly secure. In the early 15th century, England was ruled by King Henry VI. He was deeply religious, gentle by nature, and completely unsuited for power. Worse still, Henry suffered from periods of mental collapse, leaving the kingdom without leadership. While the king struggled, powerful noble families filled the vacuum. Two branches of the royal Plantagenet dynasty emerged as rivals. The House of Lancaster, represented by the red rose, the House of York, represented by the white rose. Both traced their bloodline back to King Edward III. Both believed their claim to the throne was legitimate. England was now ruled by ambition, not authority. Tensions finally erupted in 1455 at the First Battle of St. Albans. This was no foreign war. It was Englishmen fighting Englishmen in the streets of their own towns. The House of York struck first, capturing King Henry VI. Although he was later restored to the throne, the damage was done. The idea that a king could be overthrown by force had become a terrifying reality. What followed was not a continuous war, but a series of violent uprisings, betrayals, and shifting alliances. Nobles changed sides to survive. Families were wiped out in a single generation. One moment, the Lancasters controlled the crown. The next, the Yorkists reclaimed it. The battlefield decided kingship, not birthright. The House of York gained dominance under Edward IV. Edward was young, confident, and a capable military leader. He defeated Lancastrian forces and took the throne in 1461. For a time, England experienced stability, but Edward's rule relied heavily on loyalty, and loyalty in this era was fragile. When Edward IV died suddenly in 1483, the kingdom was thrown back into uncertainty. Edward IV's heirs were his two young sons. They were placed in the Tower of London, supposedly for their protection. They were never seen again. Their disappearance shocked the nation and destroyed trust in the monarchy. Their uncle seized the crown and became King Richard III. To many, Richard's rule was built on suspicion, fear, and unanswered questions. Richard III was a skilled administrator, but his legitimacy was constantly challenged. Rebellions followed him from the moment he took the throne. The nobility was exhausted by decades of bloodshed. England no longer wanted another Plantagenet war. It wanted an end. That end came from an unlikely figure, Henry Tudor. Henry was a distant Lancastrian relative, living in exile. His claim to the throne was weak, but he represented change. In 1485, when Henry Tudor arrived, he did not promise revenge, he promised stability. He presented himself not as another ambitious noble, but as a unifier. After years of uncertainty, that message resonated deeply. England was ready to accept almost anyone, as long as the fighting would finally end. Henry landed in England with a small army, and the war between him and Richard started. Although the war was primarily fought among nobles, its impact spread far beyond them. Trade slowed, local governance weakened. As the war dragged on, the old noble families of England began to disappear. The War of the Roses was not only a war of swords, but of betrayal. Alliances shifted with stunning speed. Men who had sworn loyalty one year would fight on the opposite side the next week. Entire bloodlines were extinguished on the battlefield. Lands were confiscated, titles were stripped. The very class that had once balanced royal authority was now destroying itself. By the 1480s, England's aristocracy was smaller, poorer, and deeply traumatized. Ordinary people lived in uncertainty, unsure which banner would fly over their town next. Loyalty became dangerous. Supporting the wrong claimant could cost a family everything. For many, survival meant silence. At the Battle of Bosworth Field, Richard III was killed in combat, the last English king to die on the battlefield. With Richard's death, the Plantagenet dynasty ended. Henry Tudor was crowned King Henry VII. Unlike the kings before him, Henry did not rule through constant warfare. He ruled through caution, control, and calculation. To heal the kingdom, he married Elizabeth of York, uniting the red and white roses. The War of the Roses was over. The War of the Roses destroyed England's old nobility and ended centuries of Plantagenet rule. It proved that blood alone could not secure a crown. When Henry VII took the throne, England entered a new chapter, one built not on constant civil war, but on fragile peace and careful power. The roses had finally stopped bleeding.